Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Twin Peaks, a fantastic episode, and not even going to bother beating around the bush. Let's talk about the biggest thing this episode. We have Cooper waking up from his coma back to being 100% Cooper. And what's cool about it is because along with returning to being the 100% Cooper he was, he also retains all of his memories that he spent, as Dougie, so that was pretty cool too, especially the way he's like, hey, Sonny, Jim, Janie, I'm good, talking to his boss and everything. It's like, I want you to, no matter what, you're a good man, but obviously showing like who he was and being like, yeah, doctor, check me and I'm out of here. Hey, boss, give me that gun that I know you got holstered to your side. And it's like, don't worry, I got this. And it's just like, dude, back in full motion. It's so cool. I kind of figured that was going to be what the purpose of that electrocution was. I figured it was either that or just to get him out of the way. And it seems like it's a combination of two to make him revert back to who he was. Because you had, once again, not really sure whether he's Mike or whether he's Gerard, but either way being like, hey, you're awake. And he's like, yep. And it gives him the ring, the one that Jeffries gave to Ray to put on other doppelganger Cooper's finger. And then there's also like Coop's like, I'm gonna need another egg, which I guess is, I don't know a seed. That's what he's saying, another seed. Which I'm curious, like, are those the seeds he talking about? Those little gold things like that was inside of Dougie, as well as, well, I'll get to it soon. And well, Diane, I'll go ahead and say that. Gosh, there's so many different directions to take this. Okay, since I'm already bringing her up, might as well talk about her. It's so interesting to me to see Diane's character because it seemed like, I mean, going back to the whole thing with like doppelganger. Well, I'm saying going back to it, but this is the first time I'm bringing it up this episode. I apologize. I'm sorry. I'm so hyped up and I'm like all over the place with this. Is the fact is that like Richard was quote unquote killed by Doppelganger Cooper because it was like, hey, I want you to go up there and do something for me. I was wondering why he's acting all buddy-buddy with him. I was like, oh, is it because this is Audrey's son, so you have a little sympathy for him? So I was like, no, he's only important because he's meant to be a pawn for him to use because it's like, oh, you go out there and you check it. I'm 25 years your senior, but he sent him up there just to see if anything would go wonky, and it did, and sparks popped up everywhere, and Richard's body disappeared. Now, whether he's dead, I don't know, but like Cooper kind of felt like it was probably a trap, so because he was following 3 different coordinates, 2 lined up while the other one didn't, and the conversation was like, well, might as well check out the ones that do line up. And I think he was thinking, that's too much of a coincidence that they happen to line up. It's like, that's a little suspicious, so he sent Richard to test it. So, which then turns into a situation, and he later on sends a smiley face and all to Diane, and then she acts a little like, whoa, scattered and bothered by it, but there's kind of this boom kind of sound to it. And so I was like, wait a minute, so does that mean she was being controlled this entire time, that she's been like unawarely working with Cooper, or was it like her setting him up for a trap? So then my brain, with everything that kind of gets revealed, it seems like she was manufactured. She was probably made by fake Cooper to fit this narrative. So which also begs the question, where's the real Diane? I guess it's much like this whole situation of like, well, does that mean that Diane never really existed? That she came there to work, like much like Dougie never really existed? Is that what that kind of situation calls for? That's what I'm thinking that must mean. So I was like, was there never a Diane? Because because apparently we found out about the night Cooper and her like met up for the life. It was like 3 or 4 years after they lost contact. When basically after the events of the original series, 3 or 4 years after that, Cooper popped up. Ask her all these questions. She was happy to see him and everything, and they're about to kiss. And after they kissed, like something didn't feel right, and he smiled and raped her. So that's what that smile was representing. So then again, it seems like that message is almost like a trigger thing to kind of switch back and forth between the different Dianes. But the one that helped send him those coordinates, that was probably like the good side of Diane that's not being controlled. Because like during that conversation she's having with Gordon, Tammy, and Albert, it seems like she's trying to fight it. She's like, I'm not me. So it does beg the question, like maybe Diane never existed, since they're like, or are they trying to say like the real Diane died and was replaced by this, Diane? Either way, which will make that whole situation even sadder if like she never existed, especially because her and Cooper are so close and everything. It's like, oh yeah, that would make that whole situation even sadder. But now it's like maybe there was a kind of struggle between her like wanting to help out this Cooper while also helping out the real Cooper, because she sent the like numbers to him and everything. So it begs the question. She's like Coop. So it's like, I think that good side of her was kicking in. I'm not sure like what that all represents, but definitely at the end of it all, she's not real, whether she's not like the real Diane or whether she's just not a real person, like there never was a real Diane. It's still yet to really be seen to really understand. But I was like, that's crazy. And like Tammy referred to her as a tulpa, which is like, is that what they are called? Like these fake people like Dougie and her? Or tulpa's kind of like those shadowy men too that kind of like phase in and out of reality? Is that what they're called? Is that the name given to everything from like the lodge or whatever? Whether, if the people like Bob and Mike, are they tulpas? Or could the thing that we saw at the beginning of the season that ended up killing that dude in Tracy, the one that was the character that was played by Madeline Zima, never killed like in the first episode because they were watching that thing in a glass box. Was that a tulpa in its like truest form, which we've also seen in other things, kind of vomiting. Like that episode, there's just so much. The episode where it seemed like it's like, I constantly reference as the episode that was super up to interpretation. So I was wondering, is that what that was about? I don't know. Like, I'm asking, was that a tulpa in itself? Is what I mean. Like I said, I do apologize because I'm all over the place because I'm trying to digest everything that went down. He also had, Cooper had. His boss, he's like, hey, if a Gordon Cole, this message needs to be sent to a Gordon Cole, and then it's also like, at the same time, because I like the whole situation around, like, kind of going backwards a little bit, is around Dougie's house. Like, so many converging points. The Meacham brothers went there because they're like, hey, Dougie, he looks good, but hey, we're going to drop stuff off at the house. Then you had the assassins parked outside. You had the FBI parked out. You had two people in particular, which I find it so weird that the FBI agents didn't act at all during that whole circumstance until after everything had ended. That's when they acted. But basically the assassins were waiting for him. It's like, but sadly it had no good ending for him because they parked in front of a guy's driveway, but he got super pissed at him, started ramming their car. The wife got pissed, pulled out a gun, shot at him. Crappy series turn of events, and she got shot. I was like, oh man, I thought she was dead for sure. And they're driving away. I was like, oh man, that's crazy. And he's riddling their car with, like, I would seem like it's kind of like an Uzi or a machine gun, whatever the case may be. And I'm like, holy crap. And you see a bullet and you see the wife's body lump. I was like, holy crap, she's dead. And then Tim Roth's character gets riddled with bullets. So I'm like, dude, wow, that's one way to handle some assassins. Once again, the serendipity behind the whole circumstance. It's like everything is lined up to keep Cooper out of the way for things to kind of be dealt with in their own way, in their own manner. That was just a set of circumstances. Once again, it's almost like some Final Destination stuff of like the dominoes fall in a particular way, just accidents happen so that things play out a certain way. And it's just so kind of interesting. So it's a combination of making Cooper, it was probably a gamble to make it so that Cooper would be Cooper again, while at the same time kind of getting all this bad stuff off his back so he doesn't have to worry about assassins and stuff like that. So once again, I love it that the cops didn't interfere until the guy had already killed him and he's about to walk away, and then the FBI interferes. It's like, you should have been interfering the moment gunfire went off. Because you had the Meacham brothers already locked and loaded and ready to go, but they're like, okay, let's back down and like not be focused on this. So, but you had Cooper saying some interesting things. He kind of says goodbye to Janie and Sonny Jim, and now that I'm bringing them up, like, let's not forget Diane is her sister, or whether that was all a constructed lie or something. But why would you lie about that? Once does beg the question that kind of makes me go, never mind. There has to be a real Diane. Maybe she's not alive anymore. Maybe that's the case. But nevertheless, it's like he has to say goodbye to them. He's like, yeah, the fact of the matter is, you guys, when it comes to Doug, I mean, me, you guys are my family. This time I spent with you is so happy. She's trying to like. Janie's trying to understand. She's like, what are you talking about? And it's like, and then like, she's like, you're not Doug. And Sidney Jim's like, no, you are my dad. So, and he's like, I will, Dougie will come back to you. He's like, I will come back to you. I'll walk right through that red door and I'll come back to you. So what I'm thinking is, because I don't think when he comes back, he'll be Cooper, but I'm guessing when this is all said and done, maybe Cooper will end up sacrificing himself to finish this off, or maybe something will happen to him and like one Cooper will go off and continue being Dougie. Or maybe Cooper will no longer exist and he'll come back purely as Dougie to resume that life, and that's what he means. That's how I'm interpreting it. I have no idea what way he meant. I think there was truth in the fact is that he would come back, but maybe maybe that's what he meant when he was like, okay, I need you to take another seed. So that seed is to make Dougie come back and kind of fill that void in their lives. So like they can get their Dougie back, but he can go back to being Agent Cooper again. I don't know. Like I said, or maybe it is. He will be Dougie again, because after all this is all said and done, that Cooper side of him will be wiped out. I don't know. There's multiple ways that could be dealt with. And side note too, like, is this the first time I'm curious, is this the first time in the show that either like theme thing was played? Like, one of the main themes of the show is like the song that plays in the opening. Like, it actually played within the show, but isn't that the first time it's played within this, like, in this series, or rather season of the show? Because obviously it popped up in the previous show, and the same thing for that song that was labeled as kind of Audrey's Dance. Like, that played pretty frequently in the original series, but I think this is the first time that's popped up as well in this series, or this season, whichever way you want to look at it. So I'm curious about that. Maybe that's purely my imagination. Which, really quickly, since I'm talking about it, might as well talk about the whole Audrey situation. She shows up there, at the Roadhouse with Charlie, and then it's like, oh yeah, this is Audrey's Dance, and the music plays, and the crowd kind of moves away, and like Audrey kind of gets in the middle and kind of dances, very reminiscent of like her dancing a little bit in the original series, and you had the crowd kind of swaying with her a little bit, but then like this guy kind of ruins it because he attacks the guy. He's like, hey, that's my wife. And then like she runs over to Charlie, she's like, get me out of here, and then it flashes to like a white area, and then she's like, what's going on? And she's staring into a mirror. So obviously there is something going on there. Like, maybe it's kind of like a little messed up thing, like, because like Audrey does automatically seem a little off, so maybe it's a similar situation to this whole like Diana and Dougie situation. Maybe the same thing kind of applies to Audrey, because we still haven't covered like what happened in that time frame with her, like between the coma till now, because we did hear from Doc that she was in a coma after that explosion at the bank. So it's like maybe she's trapped somewhere, or maybe she's kind of bouncing back and forth between both realities or something, like, because it was like a white space, so it makes you wonder if she like caught between like the White Lodge and this life or something. Like, is that what that's supposed to represent? Or maybe part of her is, or maybe that's a fake her, while her real, maybe her body's kind of being inhabited, like Doppelganger Cooper's body's being inhabited by Bob, and then like her soul is off in the White Lodge or something. She's kind of, once again, slipping back and forth. Don't know. Also, there's kind of an interesting thing where you had, when Richard died, you had a line from Doppelganger Cooper being like, what was it? It was something, whatever the case may be. He said something, and he referred to Richard as his son. Now, either he was like, oh, son, as in like, oh yeah, you youngster. Oh, well, thanks for your sacrifice, youngster. Like, son in that sense, or did he mean son as in like, oh, you're my son? I mean, granted, like, who's to say like Doppelganger Cooper didn't sleep with Audrey? Because Cooper never slept with Audrey, because he broke things off with her, because it's like, you're young, you'll fall in love with somebody, and he's like, because Cooper never felt right about the relationship. It's like he liked Audrey liked him, but it was like he felt like, I'm an older person and I'm in a powerful position. I feel like he'd feel like he was, manipulating her or abusing his power. It's kind of how he would feel about it. Plus, he's an FBI agent, so it adds another layer of abusing my power. So it's like, oh, they just stayed friends, so nothing ever happened. So it makes you wonder, did something happen between Doppelganger Cooper and her? Or once again, was it just a phrase of like, oh, you youngster son, like, oh yeah, sorry about that, son. Either way, I was just curious. That I feel like it more likely leans towards like it just being like a figure of speech, but a part of me is wondering, like, is there some validity to it or not? We'll just kind of have to wait and see on that too. I also love the conversation with the Mitchum brothers when they were like, okay, whoa, let me get my drink first. Okay, so explain this to us. Okay, you're not actually an insurance guy, you're actually an FBI agent, and you need us to take you to a place called a sheriff's station in Twin Peaks. It's like, yep. They're like, well, Dougie, we love you and everything, but we don't kind of get along well. That's not a good place for us to be, the whole like law enforcement and us being us. And you have Cooper being like, nah, you guys won't have to worry about that. You guys might not realize, but you guys have hearts to go. And you have Candy being like, yeah, they do. And I love that she's saying that while she's looking in a different direction. I adore you. I adore you so much, Candy. You're a ray of sunshine. I love you so much. So, I mean, just everything's moving along, and you have like, in fact, Cooper is like I said, going towards Twin Peaks. Diane was sending Doppelganger Cooper as well. I mean, because this is all about still sending him back to like the Black Lodge because there can't be two Coopers at the same time because one of them has to die to, you know, as I put it, kind of like restore balance to the universe and everything. So, but what is waiting for him at the sheriff's station? Is that where the next portal, like I said, what is he trying to get out of this? Why is it that Philip Jeffries helped him a little bit last episode talking about talk to Jody? And it's like, who is Jody? And why does he need to talk? Like, why is it Philip Jeffries trying to help him, even though Jeffries tried to have him killed by hiring Ray to kill him and putting a ring on him? So it seems like Jeffries is on the good side of things. So it's a situation of you don't know what side. Like, once again, you don't know what side Diane worked on. Was she a good person? Was she a bad person? I like to say, like, she's a combination of both, but, you know. Not 100% sure on that. Also, yeah, that weird moment at the beginning where you had, like, during that whole Richard and Doppelganger Coop situation where you had Jerry being out there with him. I was like, okay, that's weird. I was like, don't tell me they're going to put you in this situation just for you to end up dead. It's like, no, he's watching from far away with his binoculars and everything, but he was using them wrong, and he's like, oh God. Because, like, I don't know whether he realized, like, okay, I'm so messed up that I'm not realizing that I'm using them wrong, but then he still continued to use them wrong. And it's just like, I don't know what's up with Jerry, because Jerry's like, I don't think Jerry's been in, like, directly in Twin Peaks for a long time, because every other time we've seen Jerry, he's been kind of a little weird and crazy and running around places. Jerry is just not in his sane mind, so it's like, I'm wondering what that's all about. Which kind of leads into my question too, because apparently next week is like a 2-part finale, which I'm confused on many different levels, because it's like a finale already? Because it's like, to me, I think that's weird, because in my brain, I interpret the show as being like oh yeah, like, this is like the final Twin Peaks ever, that there's nothing else after this. But is it going to be a situation of like, oh, we're going to end this on like a season finale, not a series finale type of thing, where it's like, oh, there's going to be a second season to The Return, or rather look at it as Twin Peaks season 4, whatever the case may be. I'm curious, because I feel like there's so many loose ends. I mean, I guess arguably you could say like a lot of stuff has kind of been like tailored to kind of advance the story in micro ways that we haven't, like, you know, maybe then this finale will kind of put everything together for you, be like, that's what this all means, because I feel like there's so many loose ends in the story that I don't know if they're going to tackle that all in a finale. So that's why I'm curious, like, whether or not this is like a finale, or is it like, oh, this is a finale, but we'll be back in the next season or something. Because like I said, I was under the impression this was going to be like a one and done type of thing. So I'm very curious, because it just seems so too soon. Because even before now, I was like, oh, I'm pretty sure this is going to be like a 22 episode thing. So I was like, like, are they really going to be able to wrap this up in like 4 or 5 more episodes? I'm like, oh, maybe they will. But it's like, apparently not, in 2 more episodes, in fact. That's crazy. Either way, I'm excited to see what goes on. And like, things are moving like full speed ahead, and I'm so interested to see what goes down with everything that's happened, the little reveals we got in here and there. Like, how is this all going to accumulate? Like, where is the end goal when it comes to all of this? I'm very, very curious to see what it's all about. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.